Hey everybody, happy Friday, September 8th, 2017. Hope you had a nice week. I'm John Lorden and welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. Now, this one is a little different. This actually might feel more like a searchlight because it is about a missing person. However, the person actually died before she went missing. Bit of an interesting twist in this one. Today we are talking about the case of Julie Mott, and let's start with some photos here of Julie. We can see she is a young woman. We're going to get into the details about her death and, of course, learn a little bit more about her and about this big question of what has happened to her body, which is really what today's episode is about. Let's start with an article. This is from the nydailynews.com, and we're going to get some details here. A 25-year-old woman's body was stolen from her casket in a Texas funeral home in broad daylight, baffling police and forcing her family to deal with losing her a second time. It's really a terrible story in terms of the grief that her family is having to endure. Her body was stolen after her funeral in San Antonio on August 15th of 2015, which would have been her 26th birthday. Mott's body was discovered missing the next morning when staff went to take her for cremation and found the casket had been broken into. This is another part of why this story is so tragic. Her body is taken and her final wishes were to be cremated. She had dealt with a disease for most of her life, so this is something that she had talked about to her parents. Her mother's very upset because she feels like it's the last thing that Julie wanted, and of course she can't get it done for her. But there were no signs of forced entry on the Mission Parks Funeral Chapel North home, and no alarms had gone off or been tampered with overnight. That means her body was likely stolen from a private viewing area between the end of the service at 1:30 p.m. and the end of the business day at 4:30 p.m. Very, very interesting that it would be stolen in the middle of the day like that. Just how would you get away with it without being seen? I have to assume that there are other people at least working at the business that day if it's open until 4:30, let alone other families going to view their lost loved ones. The body theft is the first one in the funeral home's 108-year history, as the crime is not common. This is a funeral home that is generations, I think 5 generations of family have owned this funeral home. Quote, "This is an unprecedented and unthinkable event, and we are doing everything in our power to cooperate with the ongoing police investigation," funeral director Robert Tipps said in a statement. Let me just get it out now because you're going to see it in some of the stuff we're reviewing, or if you look into this case for yourself. Robert's middle name is Dixon, and he sometimes goes by the nickname Dick. So you'll see in other articles, yes, this guy really decided to call himself Dick Tipps. The funeral home's owners are close friends with the Mott family and knew the woman since she was born, making them outraged by this shameful act, Tipps said. Close friends is maybe even a bit of an understatement. Robert Tipps is a former employer of Julie's father. The Mott family actually lived in a home that they rented from Robert Tipps for a period of time as well. As a matter of fact, Julie's father was fired by Robert at some point in their past, but it was about 5 years, I believe, before this took place. The funeral home is offering a $20,000 reward for information leading to the body's discovery. They have a contact phone number. I will have that in the description box below. I am hoping someone out there has the information and will step up and pass it to the authorities so they can bring Julie back to her family and let them complete their grieving process. It's really terrible how they're just stuck right now. I mean, they've already had to deal with her being taken away from them through an illness that she battled her whole life, which we'll learn more about. But now but right in the middle of their grieving process, they've been stopped. And I think that's really terrible. Julie did have a Facebook page. It has now been converted to a remembrance page. We can see that she went to San Antonio College. She attended Winston Churchill High School. She was in the class of 2007. For music, her favorite was Lil Wayne. She likes Stephen King novels. The King of Queens, one of her favorite television shows. And when it comes to athletics, I'll sleep just 5 more. Part of her disease affected her breathing very heavily, and she spent a lot of time in bed. For sports and sports team, we both see that it is about equestrian and horseback riding. Apparently, she loved horses. Her mother, at her funeral, even had a ring on Julie that said horses on it. Now moving on to an article from sfglobe.com. Kind of interesting to see coverage of this going all the way to San Francisco, but it's certainly a national story. Body of 25-year-old woman stolen from funeral home 1 day after service. Julie Mott suffered from cystic fibrosis and passed away due to complications from the disease on August 8th of 2015. Mott was diagnosed at 2 years old, and doctors didn't expect her to live past 3. The fact she was able to experience 25 years of life is extraordinary. Despite being bedridden for most of it, she was still able to live a somewhat normal life, even graduating with a degree from San Antonio College in Texas. Her obituary, printed by the Daily Mail, painted the picture of a young woman who was cherished immeasurably by her family. Quote, Julie lived her life in a house full of love. Her family was deeply devoted to her living as normal of a life as possible. Perhaps her greatest relationship was the one she had with her mother. The bond between a mother and her daughter is always strong, but theirs was stronger. The facility had no security cameras, so there remains a huge question around how someone was able to smuggle a body out unnoticed. In the aftermath of the incident, Dick Tipps, owner of the funeral home, is urging lawmakers to increase the punishment for such a crime. As it stands, the crime of stealing a human body is classified as a Class A misdemeanor for abuse of a corpse, a punishment that Tipps feels is far too light. In a San Antonio Police Department report, one potential suspect was listed. And we're going to learn a lot more about that suspect. It's interesting. I kind of debate whether I should cover much information on him or not, because he seems to be a bit of an attention seeker. He seems to really enjoy the attention he's getting around this case in some kind of weird way. But it's too critical to the story, so we are going to cover it. But before we get into all that, let's learn a little bit more about cystic fibrosis. It is a genetic disorder that affects mostly the lungs. Long-term issues include difficulty breathing and coughing up mucus as a result of frequent lung infections. Different people may have different degrees of symptoms. There is no known cure for cystic fibrosis. I'll have a link to the Wikipedia article down in the description box below if you want to learn more about that. Moving over to mysanantonio.com, search for stolen body of a woman at McAllister Park results in discovery of another corpse. So essentially they decided to look at some places. I think there was about 50 people that got together, and they started looking at locations that were at least close to the funeral home, and in a park nearby they found a corpse, but it wasn't Julie. Employees of the funeral home and other volunteers were searching for Mott's body when they found the badly decomposed remains of an adult in a wooded area, said Officer Douglas Green, a San Antonio police spokesman. Quote, at this point, we think it was a coincidence they came across human remains, Green said. We strongly feel it was not Julie Mott. The body was so badly decomposed, police couldn't determine the age, sex, or race, he said. And I've seen information since confirming it is indeed not Julie's body. However, I haven't seen a whole lot of information about whose body it is or how that investigation's going. So if you're able to find some info on that, please share it in the description box or in the comment box below with the rest of us so we can take a look at it as well. Moving over to a local station there, KENS5.com. We get some more info. 8 months after the body of Julie Mott disappeared, her ex-boyfriend remains a person of interest in the case, according to the San Antonio Police Department. That's the person of interest that was mentioned in the article previously. They're a bit slow to come out with his name. We eventually will learn his name is Bill. We're going to learn a lot more about him as well. And they might have some good cause to be interested in Bill in particular. He was phoning her a lot leading right up to her death, and they had been separated for 2 years at this point. If what he says is true, and I'm just throwing that out there with a grain of salt because he has been all over a message board. I'll tell you guys about that later, talking about their relationship. But he says that they actually lived together for a while, but when they broke up, that she then moved back in with her parents. Her brother, also on that same message board, says that there might have been some emotional and possibly physical abuse that was going on in that relationship, and that's part of the reason why she left. Bill says it's because he not even fell in love, he got infatuated with someone else, and he considers it a big mistake that he really should have stayed with Julie the whole time. SAPD and Mott's ex-boyfriend both confirm cadaver dogs were used to search the man's home and car, as well as a piece of property belonging to his grandparents. The ex-boyfriend's social media activity has also been scrutinized, highly scrutinized. His Facebook, he turned it off, he turned it back on. We're going to see he talks to one publication here a little bit later, but really there is a thread going on at a site called My Death Space, which I'll have a link to the thread down below. It's 127 pages, over 3,000 separate postings. He jumps into this, if I remember correctly, around page 8 or 9, and then he weaves back in and out of it. Her brother joins in on the conversation here as well. It's pretty dramatic. Let me just put that out there. But if you're looking to get some insight into Bill and possibly what he's thinking, and maybe is he involved in this or not, I think it's pretty invaluable. It's something that you really want to look into. His account, he would occasionally lash out at people in a pretty obscene way, so some of his accounts got shut down, but the name he goes by is Heartbroken, and then as he has to open new account, he goes Heartbroken 2, Heartbroken 3. He gets all the way up to like Heartbroken 8 or 9. And if you're curious about her brother's posts on here, his name is heartbroken.my.ass. So you'll be able to find his posts fairly easily here and see the conversation that's going on between the two of them. Now, moving ahead to an article at expressnews.com. This is the San Antonio Express News in January of 2016. So we're talking about 5 months or so after this has occurred. Mission Park sued. It looks like Julie's family is not happy with the mortuary and decides to sue them. Her family has sued Mission Park funeral chapels and cemeteries, accusing it of gross negligence and seeking damages of more than $1 million. Quote, Mission lost possession of Julie Mott's body and to this day has been unable to explain how, the lawsuit states. It was the third lawsuit in less than 2 years over mishaps with bodies at San Antonio funeral homes. Bit of a disturbing trend. Mission Park released a statement. Unfortunately, we haven't received the lawsuit yet, so we can't comment on the complaint itself, the statement said. However, at Mission Park, we've never believed this theft was an issue of money. It was always about finding Julie's remains and helping the police locate the person who committed this crime. The survivors of Jose C. Perez, who was 70 when he died on February 9th, 2014, are also suing Mission Park, same company, claiming the company confused their deceased father with someone else's loved one and dressed the wrong corpse in their dad's favorite suit and jewelry. That raises an important point about Julie's case. I'm seeing information that her jewelry was actually left in the casket. And just to give you some detail about what's at least being discussed out there, people are saying the casket was pried open instead of opened properly using a casket key. They're saying that she was put onto a gurney, and the gurney was moved to another part near the back door where the roll-up doors are for getting bodies out to a vehicle, and that her hair was found on that gurney. I have not seen any information to confirm that the hair was actually tested and they are 100% sure that that is Julie's hair. I'm assuming that this is information possibly coming from an investigator, but I can't even find info to confirm that. So please take that with a grain of salt. But the casket was left behind, which is pretty strange because even if someone's going to be cremated, they're usually transported in the casket. The casket is rented for the services and then eventually returned, but that's after the cremation is done. So her body was removed in a bit of an odd way, and possibly the casket looks like it could have been broken into. So, but back to this. So we have another case here where they just got the body wrong, put the wrong clothes on the body. At a private viewing, however, the family was presented with the body of another deceased man, and then the staff said that they did not know where their father's remains are and conducted a 2 to 3 hour search, finding his body at another funeral home, the lawsuit states. Pretty, God, that would be terrible. I would hate for that to happen to a family member of mine. It's already such a tough time. You're already going through all these emotions and having to do this weird stuff like plan, a party around this, around remembering your lost loved one, and having to worry about food and flowers. I mean, there's a lot of really weird things you have to deal with when you're going through this. And on top of all that, to think that a company you're trusting to simply prepare your loved one, have them dressed appropriately, and be at the location where everyone's going to see them gets it wrong. It's really, really terrible. The Perez case was similar to the lawsuit claims filed in March by the family of Beatrice Garza against Zamaripa Funeral Home, Inc., which operates as Memorial Funeral Home, and Bayer and Bytel Mortuary Service, LLC. Why am I telling you guys about this third case? Keep that name in mind, Bayer and Bytel Mortuary Service, LLC. It accused the business of dressing the wrong woman in Garza's favorite dress and putting her in Garza's casket. Her family repeatedly told funeral home staff that the woman in their mother's clothes was not their mother. It took funeral home staff a few hours to find Garza's body once they started looking. And just looking into this case and listening to people's stories around it, I've heard some terrible things, all the way to people being cremated that weren't scheduled to be cremated, that were planning on being buried. Mistakes do happen in these businesses, but there seems to be something going on. You've got 2 lawsuits against one company in particular, and then a third one against another company, Bayer and Bytel Mortuary Service. Jumping over to news.com.au. A man accused of stealing his ex-girlfriend's corpse from a funeral home has launched an extraordinary attack on her family. It is the first time Bill Wilburn, the prime suspect in this morbid crime, has spoken to the media. Mr. Wilburn contacted news.com.au to complain about his treatment at the hands of the Mott family. Mr. Wilburn, who dated Julie for 6 years, claims her family did everything they could to keep him away from her, even threatening to eject him from her funeral. From what I've seen, particularly from the comments of Julie's brother, they were allowing Bill to come to this funeral. And remember the accusations that I told you about. They think that he might have been abusive to her. If nothing else, it seems like he cheated on her at some point. Didn't seem like he treated her in a particularly good manner, but they still allowed him to be part of her funeral and to come there. So where this claim is coming from, I'm not sure. Quote, "It's still very unreal for me. For years, I've mentally prepared for her passing, but nothing could prepare me for being robbed of the chance to mourn for her," he wrote in a rambling message sent to news.com.au from his Facebook account, which he then deactivated. If you look into the thread that I mentioned earlier, you're going to see some pretty extreme rambling, and it does really make you question, is this the type of person that could have done something like this? Could he have broken into the mortuary and taken her body at some point, maybe even after hours, I mean, we know that the alarms weren't triggered. Did he have some way to get around that? We also don't know what type of alarm system we're talking about. From what I've seen, I've only seen mention specifically of motion detectors. I haven't seen a very good analysis to say that, you know, the doors had triggers on them. If someone would have opened the doors, that would have triggered the alarm. And I haven't really seen anyone discuss the possibility that perhaps the alarm was not activated that night. Typically, you have to activate the alarm. The last employee out needs to turn that on. Is there a possibility that that wasn't turned on this particular day? I'm not sure. Mr. Wilburn also denied having anything to do with Julie's missing corpse. Several months ago, he accused Julie's brother of being the culprit in a bizarre and epically long thread hosted by My Death Space. Someone either stole her remains or the funeral home is completely at fault and doing everything they can to avoid taking responsibility. The other thing to keep in mind here is we know that they took a cadaver dog to his car, to his home, and from what I've heard about cadaver dogs and how they work, they don't just detect if the corpse is actually there. They can detect places where a corpse was put for a matter of minutes and then moved. So the fact that they didn't get enough information to charge him, if they really took cadaver dogs through his personal areas like that, makes me suspect that maybe he's not involved in this. Yes, he seems obsessive. We're going to see his obsession as we go through some more of these stories here. And another question that a lot of people ask, particularly in the My Death Space thread, is this guy really smart enough to have done this and then come here and drop hundreds of messages like this? Doesn't it seem like if you got away with a crime like this that you would try to not be calling attention to yourself? Bill plainly says in one of those messages he knows investigators are looking through that thread over and over. It even makes me suspicious of some of the stuff that he's laying in there. At one point he talks about how he gets sick at the sight of blood and he's a germaphobe. He can't even touch door handles. I don't know if I really believe in all that because literally 2 lines down from that message, oh yeah, the investigators are looking at this thread. I know they are. But we'll see. The Mott family remains convinced that Mr. Wilburn stole Julie's body. They have claimed he bombarded Julie with unwanted calls and text messages for weeks as she lay dying in hospital. One of the interesting twists in that thread is they talk about a tape that he actually had hosted on a website at one point. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore, but luckily one of the other users did some transcription and got a lot of what was on that tape into the thread at My Death Space. So you can find it there. It was a phone conversation between Bill and Julie, and it seemed like he was kind of egocentric. It seemed like he really wasn't thinking about her end of the conversation very much, and it seemed like she really wasn't interested in even being on the phone with him. So you might want to check that out and see if you got the same feelings that I did about that conversation thread. But we're moving on to ksat.com. And here, this is from February 21st of 2017. We're coming much more current on this story. Ex-boyfriend charged. Bill Wilburn, 31, accused of twice entering Mission Park funeral home. What the heck is this about? I wish I knew, guys, but let's learn more. According to a criminal complaint, Wilburn was seen on surveillance video entering Mission Park North on June 26th and June 29th, despite being issued a criminal trespass notice weeks after Mott's body disappeared. Now, you notice at this point they have a camera system. We'll learn why in a minute. In the first incident, Wilburn fled from the premises after being identified by 3 witnesses, according to court records. Quote, I think he's being a little disingenuous, and I don't think he's giving us all the information that we need, and he certainly hasn't been what I would call overly cooperative, police spokesman Sergeant Jesse Salome said. A Mission Park representative said Tuesday that the company installed surveillance cameras after Wilburn was issued a criminal trespass warning in September of 2015. So that means 3 times he has trespassed at that location. The criminal trespassing charges came after Wilburn repeatedly harassed employees of the funeral home. So what's going on? What's he harassing them about? If you look at the My Death Space thread, my only assumption on it could be that he's trying to maybe find proof that she could possibly still be there, or that someone there did something with her. Other people have theories, does he need some kind of supplies for, keeping up this corpse that he has? I don't think it's anything quite like that, but something is really off with this guy. He gets so intently focused on something. It seems like he can't let it go. As a matter of fact, we're moving forward to March. Julie Mott's ex-boyfriend ordered to wear GPS after additional trespassing accusation. We're now up to 4 separate instances of him going where he's been asked not to go. Prosecutors said in court that Wilburn was captured February 20th on surveillance video at Mission Park North, despite a criminal trespassing notice against him for the last 18 months. And they're going to put a GPS on him. Quote, as far as the GPS, normally I would oppose it also, but I've talked to my client about it. He actually thinks it's a good idea because it will show these are all lies, Wilburn's attorney David Garcia said. If they have him on footage, I'm not sure how they would be lying about that. And the police are obviously collecting the footage. I've seen some notes about that they're requesting all the footage from the home. So Wilburn told a KSAT 12 reporter via telephone last summer that he was no longer a person of interest in the case. SAPD has repeatedly denied that claim. A judge last month signed off on a warrant allowing investigators to collect a DNA sample from Wilburn. One question you might be asking out there is, what about a lie detector test? Has this guy done a lie detector test? Well, whenever it comes to anything with this guy, there's drama. He hasn't done a lie detector. At one point, he said he was going to do it with one of the local television stations. Then he said, oh, I got the station wrong, and, I'm probably not going to do it now. So he has not done a lie detector test, but still, I'm really leaning on that information about the cadaver dog search, unless he didn't use that vehicle and he didn't take her to his home or his grandparents' home at any point. But he would have had to maybe have a plan. There's some question of, did he support her being cremated or not? He knew that was coming up. Could he have had some plan in his head about, well, I'm going to take her somewhere. I'm going to give her the burial that I think she deserves. And to do that, I know that I can't use my car, so I'm going to use someone else's car. I can't take her to a place that I'm known to be at, so I'm going to find some patch of land somewhere where I'm going to keep her and be able to go there and, pay my respects over and over, or something along those lines. I don't know. Another little interesting tidbit, when he was at her funeral, he saw a ring on her finger and he said, oh, it's the ring that I gave her to her mother. And her mother did not correct him, but according to her brother, it was not a ring that he had given her. It was that horse's ring that I told you about earlier in this episode. The ring that he gave her, no one knows where it is, but he seems very insistent that, no, she was wearing my ring. She was wearing my ring, even though the brother's saying, look, my mom just didn't have the heart to tell you it wasn't your ring. I mean, she was at her daughter's funeral. So, moving to another article at mysanantonio.com, 2 years after disappearance, new developments emerge in Julie Mott case. And boy, this case could use some more developments. New court documents examined by mysa.com reveal a previously undisclosed relationship between Mission Park and a third-party mortuary service. What the heck could this be about? Mott's body was delivered to Mission Park North at 3401 Cherry Ridge Drive, where her memorial service was held around noon on August 15th, the day she would have turned 26. At roughly 1:30 p.m., everyone left the chapel, with the exception of Bill Wilburn. Another reason why people are suspicious of him is because of this, who was described as Mott's, quote, obsessed ex-boyfriend. At the time of her death, Wilburn and Mott had been separated for 2 years. According to court documents, Wilburn remained in the chapel for an extra 10 to 15 minutes after everyone left and was then seen out by a Mission Park employee who locked the door behind him. Does that clear him? I mean, we have an employee literally escorting him and then locking him out of the building. Now, why would the employee be locking up the building, according to this story, somewhere around 1:45 or 2 p.m. if this business is still open until 4 that afternoon? I don't know. I don't know why that discrepancy is there. I'm really not sure who to believe on that part. But let's get back to this other company here. The next morning, an employee discovered Mott's casket was empty. One of the hinges on the casket had been damaged, and I think it's beer or Buyer maybe, but I think it's beer. That's basically the gurney that they move bodies on which it was resting, was found in an unnatural position by an exit door. At the heart of the new developments is a relationship between Mission Park Funeral Chapel and Cemeteries and a third-party mortuary service company, Buyer and Bytel. So remember that article before where we're looking at 3 different lawsuits going on and we thought 2 of them were related, but one of them wasn't? Well, these businesses also do business together. So in some way, all these instances of bodies being misplaced are kind of connected. How strong is that connection? Let's learn. Mott family attorneys say Tipps and his wife, Kristen Tipps, the president of MPII Inc., the parent company of Mission Park, either didn't know or deliberately sought to conceal the fact that Mission Park subcontracted services from Buyer and Bytel for years. According to court records, Buyer and Bytel employees had unfettered after-hours access, exterior door keys, and alarm codes to Mission Park facilities, including the location on Cherry Ridge Drive from which Mott's body disappeared. So hold on now. There's this whole assumption that she had to have been taken at some point from 1:30 to 4 because that's when the business was open. After that, the alarm would have been on. No one could come in while the alarm was on. Well, we're now learning that, yes, someone absolutely could have come in when the alarm was on. Any current employee of Buyer and Bytel, or possibly a former employee that still remembered the codes, maybe had access to one of the keys, made a copy of a key, something along those lines. All of a sudden, our list of suspects has just exploded in a new direction. After initially denying the use of subcontractors to transport and embalm deceased loved ones, Mission Park now admits that they have used the subcontractor for many years without any supervision to speak of by Mission Park, Mott family attorneys allege. Bexar County property records show that MPII Inc. even serves as Buyer and Bytel's landlord. The company is the listed owner of the building at 211 Brooklyn Avenue, where Buyer and Bytel conducts business. So a lot of connectivity here. This is more than just 2 businesses that are helping each other. One of these businesses owns the land that the other business operates on. Very, very strange. According to court records, Kristen Tipps testified on February 28th that there was no possibility that someone other than a Mission Park employee was involved in the services provided to Julie Mott. But her testimony appears to contradict 3 affidavits from former Buyer and Bytel employees who claimed they delivered bodies to Mission Park on a regular basis. They go into detail about one of these employees in particular. I'm not going to go step through step on this, but it's just basically confirming the level of access they had, the fact that no one had to be there for them to go in. They had access throughout the whole building. It's really taken a very interesting turn here. Mission Park has had recent legal trouble as well. Online Bexar County District Court records indicate Mission Park and its parent company, MPII Inc., have been sued for damages or breach of contract at least a dozen times since 2000. Hold on. So we only heard of 2 cases in that previous article. They have been sued practically almost once a year since 2000. What is going on in this operation? Something seems to be very, very wrong with this business and how it's operating. Meanwhile, Wilburn, Mott's ex-boyfriend, who did not respond to multiple requests for comment, which really surprises me because I'm telling you, if his the attention that he gathered and exploited over and over at My Death Space is any indicator, this guy loves attention, but maybe he's finally got a decent lawyer telling him to shut up. He allegedly began harassing everyone connected to Mott's case to get information on her body's whereabouts after the disappearance. According to one police report, Wilburn called Mission Park staff over 200 times in one day, and police issued him a criminal trespass notice on September 2nd, 2015, forbidding his entrance to Mission Park property. The Mott family reported Wilburn to the Bexar County Sheriff's Office on February 8th, 2016, after he called them more than a dozen times between midnight and 4 a.m. over a 2-week period to ask for information on the investigation. You could look at this two ways. You could look at this as, yes, this is an obsessed ex-boyfriend and he's still obsessed and he won't let it go. And he could legitimately be investigating what happened to Julie's body. I have to tell you, after reading through his comments, I don't think I saw any comment in particular about how upset he was that someone took her body, which is a little strange to me. Or you could flip it the other way and say, well, he's definitely involved and he's inserting himself into the investigation, trying to push focus in a different direction, maybe trying to keep his ear to the ground to learn if they're on to him or not, especially if he's calling the family, asking them for information on the investigation. But I really don't know which way to go with that. If there is conclusive proof that anyone has deliberately withheld information regarding Mott's whereabouts or purposefully deceived investigators on the case, they could face criminal charges. I hope they would charge the heck out of these people. If it's the business, if it's him, if it's someone else, they really need to be held responsible for this. This is just a terrible, terrible story. Both the civil and criminal cases are pending, and Salome said police are far from considering the investigation into Mott's disappearance cold. A case isn't cold until you've exhausted every possible lead and explored every possibility, and I don't know that we're there yet. I'm really happy to hear that because the way I'm looking at it, there's a lot of possibilities going on here. Sure, you've got Bill, the ex-boyfriend. I think there's enough information out there where he's still a person of interest for me, but I don't know that he's the main suspect. You've got the business here. Robert Tipps, is he involved in this cover-up in some way? Is that why he has been the one to offer a reward and to say that the penalty should be stiffer for this type of crime? Is he kind of inserting himself into the investigation in that manner, trying to protect himself a little bit? And does he know what happened to her body or not? Is he doing that just to try to protect his business? I mean, there's a lot of different angles to look at there. You now have this other company, which supposedly would be a company to come and pick her up for her being cremated. Is there an employee at that company that has something to do with this? Bill mentioned he thought that one of the employees at Mission Park that was an usher there seemed like he was really upset. Although I think ushers are typically family members. I think it could go either way. But Bill throws some suspicion in that guy's direction. Is there someone else? I think Bill even alludes to the fact that Julie's brother might have been the one to do it at some point. Once again, this is Bill just throwing all this information all over the place. I don't know how much we can really put into that. But the way I'm looking at this point, I don't even know how many employees there are at that company that works with the mortuary here. So there could be a lot of persons of interest in this case. But you still have Bill not taking his lie detector. According to Julie's brother, all the employees at the mortuary have taken a lie detector and passed. Bill refutes that. He says, no, all the employees haven't taken that. I've heard that from investigators. I don't know which side to believe there either. But in the end, what you have here is a family that has been stopped in the middle of its mourning process, that can't give the final wishes of Julie to her to make sure that she is properly cremated, and then to give them a place where they can go and honor her memory in some way. All of that has been halted and stopped. And you have this horrible, horrible thought going on about who took her, why did they take her, what are they doing with her? It's really, really terrible. I feel so bad for this family. I'm glad that they're doing this lawsuit in the way that they're doing it. I think it makes a lot of sense to just go with this kind of negligent business aspect and to try to sue from that direction, see what information they might be able to get out of that. Because essentially at that point, if the business is really non-involved, they're also going to become an investigator on this case and want to find out who really did it so they can get out of this $1 million lawsuit. I know it's tough in a case like that, but sometimes you have to put these little pressures on so everyone gets their head going in the right direction. And outside of that, it seems like police are doing everything they can to investigate this case. It is a terrible, terrible story. One more thing before I let you guys go. In honor of Julie, in honor of what her family is also now facing, but more important than that, what they faced throughout her life, I am going to head over to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and make a donation on behalf of myself and my amazing Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for helping me do things like this. It really just means the world to me when I'm able to help in this way. I will have a link to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation down below. If you are so moved, please consider making a donation to them. This is a horrible disease. Obviously, there is no cure, and I think it's pretty amazing what Julie was able to accomplish in her short number of years on this world. And obviously, she's leaving a lasting impact with a lot of people that didn't even know her. Unfortunately, it's a story that I'd love to hear a happy ending to, because right now it's not the kind of thing that I want to remember her for the rest of my life. I think there's a lot of other cool stuff that we could look at in her life and talk about, as opposed to this is the girl that was stolen from the funeral home. And I'm very hopeful that her story will progress from there, that it will move forward. Maybe you're the one to help. So please remember, I also have contact information in the description box below. If you have a tip on this case, please do the right thing. Please phone it in. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this episode of BrainScratch. I hope you are having a nice day. Have a nice weekend. I'll see you back here on the Lord and Arts channel on Monday. Take care, everybody.